go. Okay.
Hello.
Yes, I think we're here. All right, everybody. Anthony Bolling here. Another episode of Chasing Gazillions. Not the same as making millions. Spending time with a local real estate professional. Today, guys, we have a special treat for you. We're talking about free money, grant money. That's right. If you think that home ownership is not available to you, uh, today we have a special guest. A recent client of the Anthony Bolling Group is here today to share with you her journey in utilizing the District of Columbia's home purchase assistance program. She's going to tell you the ups, the downs, the ins and outs, and the entire journey today. And so before we jump in and start taking your questions and all, let me introduce to you one of the most recent homeowners here in the District of Columbia, uh, Ms. Eliza Bolling. Welcome to Chasing Gazillions, dear.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for inviting me on. I'm really excited.
Well, it's our pleasure indeed. It was our pleasure and an honor to have the opportunity to work with you to help you purchase your first home here in the District of Columbia. And again, we know you're a single woman, so we're not going to put your address out there where you are and you're living. But what we want to do here with the time that we have is we want to share with our audience about your journey through the HPAP program, maybe a little bit before you got started, and all the way up and through today. And so let us start with that. Before, when did you begin your journey through the District of Columbia's HPAP program?
Well, well, I've heard about the program when I first came home from college in 2021, but I was living at home, so I wasn't really interested. I looked at it like sparingly, but I wasn't in a place mentally to say, you know what, I want to own a home. I had been thinking about like apartments and stuff, but really, I was okay at home. Um, but then around December of 22, January 23, I really started talking with my inner circle, and I had just turned 24. I really wanted to, take another step in adulthood, as they say. And so I remembered I'm looking at apartments, and I was like, I'll just do an apartment. I'll do an apartment. Because some of my inner circle, they lived in apartments. But the other half of my inner circle said, you know what? If you're going to spend all that money in DC, it's expensive to live in DC. If you're going to spend all that money, you might as well move out of the house, And I said, you know what? That's actually a really good idea. There was a program that my dad told me about, and I was like, you know what? I'll just look more into that and see if I can get more information.
Okay,
And
great.
yeah.
So about January of 2023, you and your friends who are adulting, you're thinking about the next phase in adulthood. You're considering the apartment. You're living in the District of Columbia. You're facing the high rental costs of living here in the district, but you want to move out of your parents' home into your next phase of life. I understand that you are still currently in your master's program, so you're a student, but you are working. You're working full time. So you investigate this HPAP program around January of 23. What you find out? First of all, how did you procure the services of someone, a professional to help guide you? What was the next step for you once you decided, yes, I want to buy a house?
Well, I started doing some research into the HPAP program. And when I was doing my research, I realized it was a lot more technical knowledge that I didn't have. that I was comfortable doing on my own. So I reached out to the Anthony Bolling Group uh, to get their professional services to help me navigate through all the housing jargon that I was going into. And, they helped me get into the HPAP class. So HPAP has two courses. There's a full 8-hour course, and then there's a four. At the time there was a additional 4-hour. You could either do it before or after the 8-hour course, just to go over like an introductory what it is, and then the 8-hour was going through all the documents. You'll have to do how long the process is, and meeting your advisor for your HPAP side. And that process was pretty good. 8 hours. Yeah, it's daunting when you think about it, but really, I mean, you pick a Saturday and just spend a Saturday just listening in, taking notes where you can, but you can listen in and stuff. So
okay, great. So you got involved. You made the decision. You want to buy a house. You have the support of your inner circle and friends and family. Some were still saying rent. Some were saying own. You made the commitment, but your first step was you got with a real estate professional that understood the lingo, the language, the road, the journey, and that real estate professional team then started providing you with information that you then started pursuing. So somewhere in January, you said you started taking some 8-hour course. But now was that from the HPAP program itself, or where did you find, or where were you directed to find this quote 8-hour course?
So HPAP program, it's a city program, but they have different sites that you can go to meet with your assigned advisor. So different areas have different sites. You kind of want to pick the one that's closest to your area or closest to where you're thinking of living. I did both because where I was living and where I was thinking were in the same area. So I picked Marshall Heights, which was the site that I picked, and that was where my eventual advisor was going to be. And through HPAP, that was where through Marshall Heights is where I had the 8-hour course and met my advisor and did my other 4-hour course as well.
Okay, great. So talk to the people who are out there saying, okay, now I'm taking a class, it's 8-hour class plus 4 hours. You said it could be daunting. Talk to us about the paper and the paperwork and all that was required for you to get approved in this program.
So once I did the courses, which aren't as bad as you think, once you get through it, you get assigned to, I went to Marshall Heights. You can go through one of their other sites. You'll get assigned a person. And this person sent me like a checklist of documents that they'll need to basically approve that you can afford to live at your house. Those documents were a combination of like pay stubs that you've had for the past 3 months, I believe at the time. You also needed like a proof of either employment or like some type of income statement, which also goes with the pay stubs, but you also need like a proof of employment I had to provide. And then there were other
tax returns.
Yeah, tax return. There we go. Tax returns, W-2s. For me, at the time, because I was a college student and I just graduated, I didn't have like W-2s that were within like the past 2 years because I was a lifeguard before COVID. So it had been like at least 3 to 4 years between that point. So I didn't have any W-2s, pay stubs, but what I did have were my college transcripts. So if you are a student or you're a recent graduate or you're in school in the DC area, if you don't, it's, I didn't have a job in the past 2 years, or I don't have like a W-2, they'll take your transcripts because that counts as you going, essentially to work and stuff.
Okay,
so I provide all that in a packet.
In a package. Okay, great. So there was a requirement for you to submit documents that are within your reach, your job's W-2 statement, your tax return, your college transcript. They give you a checklist. You grabbed all these documents. uh how long did it take you to assemble all your documents and then go and say, here, I've given it all to you?
And I probably should have done this in the beginning, but I'm going to make a disclaimer that this was my own personal experience with the HPAP program in Marshall Heights. It might not be your experience, but it was my personal experience.
Yeah.
So for me, I did the course in January, and I was instructed by the advisor to reach out and make an appointment with her at the earliest convenience that you could get all your documents together. The earliest available appointment was April. So that was like that was like 4 months. So I had all my documents, but I had to wait till April to get an appointment with her. And once I got an appointment with her, it was, I got in. It was like not even an hour conversation, really. Just going through, making sure I had all the documents. She had questions. She's like, "Where's your W-2s, your pay stubs?" I'm like, "Hey, on your checklist says if you didn't have these, you could provide transcripts. Here are all my college transcripts, my current master's transcripts." Like, "Oh, okay, we'll take those." And she went through. She told me, "You know what? This is a pretty good packet. I'll probably have you processed in like a month. It takes 30 days because your stuff is all good. And you obviously going to run your credit check, obviously. But barring any issues, I don't think you have any issues. So we'll move forward.
Okay, great.
You hear from me in about 30 days."
So let me refresh for everybody. So you start in January. You want to buy a house. You go into this program from the city, and let me just say for everyone, the HPAP program provides to eligible district residents up to $206,000 in grant monies, free money, if you're eligible, towards the purchase of a home here in the District of Columbia. So you have to be eligible, you have to meet the criteria, and you have to buy a home here in the District of Columbia somewhere. Now, you saying you got started with this journey in about January. You got some information, you went through a class, 8 hours of training, home buyer training to familiarize you with the home buying process. You selected a real estate professional to serve as your exclusive representative to help guide you through this process with the real estate lingo. And then you said, "Hey, I called the agency and said, I'm ready." And they said, "Okay, come see me in April." So now we're up to about April now. And you go in and you submitted all your documents to your local HPAP counselor intake center. And because you were ready and you had all your documents lined up, they accepted your documents and said, "Wow, thank you." Now, of course, if you didn't have your documents, that might have added to the process, a delay, but you were ready. And so now they said in about a month or so that's April, they say maybe in about May, you should get your approval. Now, the approval, because now you've submitted your documents, you're still not quite approved. And now they are going to do something with your documents. They're going to qualify you and essentially determine your buying power. How do you know after you submitted everything that you are now approved, and what were you approved for?
So once you go to your intake center and you meet with your counselor, you're saying, "I'm good to go." And she said, "Okay, I'll process your information. In about 30 to 45 days, you'll get a notification saying that you are approved, and you're going to get something called a notice of eligibility." And then at the 45-day mark, you should actually get like the physical, email, but physical notice of eligibility. And this notice of eligibility is basically saying from HPAP and from the city of DC to whatever your first trust mortgage company that, hey, I'm approved through this program. They're going to support me with whatever level of money that you're going to get from me, because I didn't make as much money. I qualified for the biggest tier, for the 200,000 portion, and we're going to cover HPAP is going to cover that portion. And this is a notice of eligibility saying that we went through the documents, we were approved to go, and we have this document stating that once you guys give them their first trust mortgage, will come out with the second trust. So HPAP is your second trust. It's not your mortgage. It's not your first mortgage. Your first home mortgage is something that you should be working on during the 30 to 45 days while you're waiting for your eligibility, where you're meeting with the mortgage company, you meet with your mortgage advisor, your loan officer, and that is the time where you're making those connections. And the mortgage company or the bank, will give you a mortgage estimate. And then when you get the notice of eligibility, then they can fully calculate how much your buying power is going to be, which is a combination of your first trust plus HPAP.
Well, you're throwing out some terms here now because you seem quite knowledgeable. But for those listeners for the first time, now you're talking about the HPAP money is a second trust, and that's a loan. And now you're saying there's something called a first trust. When did you, after you submitted your documents to the local HPAP intake, when did you meet and how did you know to find this thing called first trust lender?
Well, in your 8-hour class, they tell you about the first trust, second trust, and what that process looks like. Okay. So once you get through your class, okay, I need a bank that's going to give me another portion of the money, and I need the HPAP to give me the second portion of the money. You know that before you get to your intake center. Okay. Once you get to the intake center and you give all your documents to your advisor, and she says, okay, I'm going to start processing. For me personally, that was when I started looking for a bank to be my first trust. And I went through the Anthony Bolling Group through their
leverage resources and extensive, other
catalog of banks. Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I looked at their top 3 recommendations, but I ended up going with First Home Mortgage Company. Mm-hmm. I went through them because Miss Ingrid, very nice. Ingrid Repavy.
It's okay, promoter. Ingrid Repavy.
She was really cool. She was very knowledgeable, very kind to me. And especially since it was my first time buying a home and I was just new to this whole process. And she was very helpful, very extensive. I really appreciate her to this day. But I went through her and we had obviously email correspondence. And that took like maybe a couple of weeks of emails, like going back and forth, making sure this was the right decision. And that should take as long as you need. But I used the 30 to 45 day HPAP
while we're waiting on the NOE.
Because my original plan was, okay, I'm gonna turn in my documents 30, 45 days. That puts me May. I'll give it a couple weeks, mid-May, and I could get with the first trust, and then I could be ready to go. Everything's good. So by June, I'll have all my documents, and I can go find a house, and I'll be moving in the middle of summer.
Well, you know what? That's a great segue to talk to the audience then that's out here listening about you and the emotions that you were going through. You're working with these professionals. You're working with a real estate professional now. You're working with a first trust lender. You're working with a CDC intake center. I mean, you said you were 23, 24. Talk to the group about what you're going through. I mean, was it just smooth? You seem awful calm and smooth now, but was it all smooth and roses? Was there any frustration, any fears, any trepidation?
I was definitely nervous a lot. And if you ask my parents, they'll tell you that I was stressed. I was stressed because this was something, having been exposed to real estate most of my life, pretty much my entire life. It's on the, if you're not in it, you're like, oh, this is really fast. It goes really quickly. It goes really quickly. You have to be quick. You have to be quick. You be quick. And this process wasn't quick. So that initial was like, ugh, I don't like it. But taught me patience. When I met with my intake liaison, my first meeting with her was a little abrasive, I want to say. Um, she just wasn't really kind to my real estate agent. Uh, she was very, I don't know. She just seemed, she basically, my real estate agent had some questions about, initially when we first started our meeting, had some questions that he wanted clarification on. And she basically said, I'm not talking to anybody but me. And she kind of, eventually she asked him to just step out of the room for, one reason or another. And it was just like kind of rude to me. I felt very rude. I was like, he's supposed to be my advisor and helping me, and you're telling him to leave. Eventually, I just said I don't feel comfortable talking without him. So he came back in and we were able to move forward. But that first interaction kind of was kind of an introduction to how our relationship was going to go with this liaison. Because I keep mentioning the 30, 45 days, because that's something that they stress in the HPAP program. It's going to take 30 to 45 days to get your notice of eligibility. And so mid-May, I was waiting for an email notice of eligibility. So I gave it up, but I didn't get it mid-May, right? So I was like, oh, well, maybe I just need a couple more weeks of processing time. Maybe I just misread the information. So I went back through all my notes and all the pictures I had taken of the PowerPoint. And they said, no, it's 30, 45 days, but reach out after 60. So after 60 days, that's June 1st, June 5th, that week, I reached out because I had already gotten approved with my first trust, because I'd taken the 30, 45 days to work with them and build a relationship. And my liaison from HPAP told me, hey, I'm going to go process this stuff, but you look pretty good. You might as well go find a house. And so I did. I went out. I toured a bunch of houses with my real estate agent. I met with the first home. And then I just so happened to find the house that I'm currently living in. And it was an estate sale.
Well, let's talk about, before we jump there, because I know I'm monitoring time.
I was just bringing up that because I had found the house. I had done what I was supposed to do. I met with the first trust. And so, but I hadn't gotten the notice of eligibility, and the bank was wondering, saying, hey, it's a big chunk of change that you have to kind of upfront. What's going on? And so I reached out to the HPAP liaison, and she didn't respond to me.
Right. And let's stay there, because again, you're bringing up some great points for people who are out there watching. And without throwing any particular individual under the bus, it's safe to say that you were nervous in the process, you were working with professionals, and although you had an expectation that you would be done you turned all your stuff in April, you think you're going to be done in 30, 45 days, May-ish, and here it is, by June, you haven't received the coveted notice of eligibility. While simultaneously, because you were advised, you've gone out thinking the NOE is on its way, you've gotten your first trust lender, and you've gone out with your agent and you're looking in the market. You're touring the market, you're looking at properties. Before you found the house that you now have landed on, talk with the audience about touring with a real estate professional, seeing the market, what you saw, what you was expecting, what you were thinking, given the buying power that the first trust lender has suggested was your buying power.
So that was
which, by the way, your buying power was.
Am I allowed to say that out loud? I guess I can. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Like it was my buying power was three initially was before I got my NOE was three projected to be 350,000. And then once I got eventually all the NOE and paperwork, it was about 320.
320. Exactly. So again, 320. So you're out in the program 320. And you're going out with your real estate professional and you're touring the market. Now, there are a lot of persons who are saying, I can hear their voices right now. $320,000 in the District of Columbia. Where are you going to find a house for $320,000? How did you feel about having that as your buying power?
Well, at first, I was like, "Oh, that's a lot of money. I'm gonna get whatever I want, right?" But then when I actually looked at the market, there's not a lot of houses under 400. It's not. But unlike other people who either have tried to do the program and either haven't found what they were looking for or just didn't do the program entirely because they wanted um, what they wanted was more than 320,000 could do in DC. That really just told me that they didn't want to live in Ward 7 and Ward 8. And I'm from Ward 7. Grew up in Ward 7 and 8. I've been to school. I've had teammates, friends. I've lived my whole life over here. So I was not concerned about being in Ward 7 or 8. It was honest. It's 10 minutes from my house. My parents, my church is over here. I was not concerned about that. So when I was looking in the market and we looked through the MLS portal.
Yes.
Which is a professional. It's not Zillow, but it's a professional. Like you
multiple
have to
listing service used by real estate professionals to list properties that are for sale.
Yes. And it's really good. And you put in your buying power and they show you a bunch of houses that fit that criteria. And my agent printed off like 10 or 12 of them that just fit the list of things that I wanted. So I gave him a list of things that I wanted in a home. I didn't want a house. I didn't want a condo. I didn't really care if it was like a townhouse per se, but I didn't want to be in the middle. Like, you know how they have rows. I didn't want to be in the middle.
Okay, great. So again, you're learning, you've been into the class, and you're saying that working with your real estate professional, you defined your buying criteria. Now that you've been qualified by First Trust Lender, you know your buying power. You're going out to look for something, and now you've listed, I don't know, maybe your top 10 criteria of what you would want in a home.
Right.
And then your real estate professional tried to identify properties that met that criteria. Now, you had touched on something here that's an important thing that comes up often is expectations of where one will live or desire to live, and balancing that, reconciling that with where you want to live, with your buying power and ability to purchase doesn't always match up, right? And as a first-time home buyer, this being the first time you're buying a home, and given that you were only out of school 2 years, and you're working a job, your first full-time employment here, your buying power is what it is. And then you started to say, well, but there are certain types of houses and housing I was interested in or not interested in. You said I wasn't interested in a condominium, which is a property type that allows persons to live in where the grass and other things are maintained. You weren't interested in living in a row house, meaning you would be in the middle and the other two houses on both sides of you, and you would be in the row in the middle. You didn't want that style of home, but a townhouse, a semi-detached single-family house where you had some yard on one side and maybe somebody was attached to the other side, or a detached property, single-family home detached. These are things you were looking for. You had other criteria that, of course, you were looking for. How talk to the audience about balancing what it is you wanted with what your realtor was finding in the market and how you were reconciling the two.
I mean, for the most part, my real estate agent was pretty good about finding things that fit in my criteria. Um, in the sense that, I gave him a list of things that I really wanted to have, and he showed me a house. I think there was one house that was detached. It was by itself, in northeast area. Still Ward 8, it's Ward 7-ish. Ward 8 is in like the little area. It was pretty. It was a really pretty house. It had a nice backyard. It was near a school. It was near my church. Usually when you're trying, a rule of thumb that I found, or I've been told my whole life, when you're trying to find your own place, you either want your house to be near your place of work, your place of religion, if you have a religion, or your family. And that house was near place of religion and place of family for me. It wasn't necessarily near work, but it was, DC's not that big in that sense, so I could get to work relatively easy. It would have just added like maybe 15, 20 minutes to my commute, but it really wasn't that bad. So I picked that, I looked at that house and it was really pretty, but then I thought about, it was a detached house. It had 2 bedrooms. And I really thought about living there, and something about it just didn't fit. It didn't speak to me. It was really nice. It was freshly renovated. But then I realized I had said, I don't really care if I'm near a school or not. And then it was summer, school had let out, and all these kids were just walking back and forth. And I was like right off of Main Street too. So there's a lot going on right there.
And I think you bring up a great point here that the audience should hear and know. On the one hand, there's this intuitive feeling that you have that you're saying, oh, it didn't quite feel right. But yet you were able to identify some tangible features and qualities about the property and the neighborhood where you're living. School kids, main road, traffic, and those things then became concerns that, well, if I'm living here as a single woman by myself here, am I going to enjoy coming to this location, living here every day for what could be the next 5 or 10 years? And ultimately, that's how you determine that property wasn't right for you. It wasn't just an intuitive feeling.
Right. And so it was things like that where I would go in, and either the house would be like within my budget, but then it was like I'd have to put in so much work to fix it. There was one house, it was a detached house, and it had been slightly renovated, like the bathroom had been renovated, and you could tell an older person used to live there, and they renovated it in mind for an older person to live there. So it was nice, but it was tiny. It was tiny, and it like inside looked cool, but on the outside, it was like structurally the bank was not going to like be a go for that, because you would have to put in so much more work per their like loan requirements that it was going to.
And by so much more work, you're referring to more money, more resources.
Yeah, and they weren't going to swing it. It wouldn't have been a good return on investment. So that house was out. It was cute, but there was too much that had to go into it.
Sure. So you're buying a property, you're a first-time home buyer, but now you are saying words like, "Oh, but I'm also an investor now. I'm investing in real estate, even though it's the first time for me and it's a home I'm going to live in. But I'm also an investor. I'm investing. I have to be mindful of these criteria that my bank is imposing on me, the HPAP program is imposing on me, and so you're looking in the market. So now finally, you find a property. You find a property. You get your NOE, your
Fine.
notice of eligibility. You find a property that you like, and you put an offer in on it, and the offer is accepted, and now that property is under contract. You found it. You were looking, you found it, and you put it under contract. Now, after you put a property under contract, then what happened? What was the next step? What then began to happen?
Well,
The process. What were you expecting to?
I was expecting, once I got my NOE and I put the contract down, I was going to meet with the title company, which is different from your bank and HPAP. Usually there's a connection between like a bank and a title company, but I went through the Anthony Bolling Group and their title company that they work with usually, and they're pretty good.
That's premium title, and Ben Soto, the principal of that one. Okay, great. And they are going to conduct a settlement.
So which is settlement is a day that you pick. It can be whatever day you pick, and you go in and you basically fill out all the documents that basically give you ownership over the house. So you change the title from either, if it's a previous owner, from them to you, and you have to file it with.
Oh, okay. So you're referring to the loan documents from your first trust lender and your second trust lender, and those loan documents are prepared by your settlement company for you to go in and sign.
Yes,
that's fine. But prior to going to settlement and becoming the new owner of the property, and after you put the property under contract, I want to look at that gap in between and talk about, and I'll just get to it. You ran into a snag with the HPAP program. You ran into a wall.
I did. So if we remember the timeline, we're in June now. And my liaison from HPAP, I finally get contact with her. And
you got your NOE at this point.
I'm explaining where we are in timeline. I haven't heard back from her. She hadn't actually processed my application yet.
Okay, but we're not going to throw anyone under the bus here. What we're saying is that now that you have your NOE from the program, you're approved, you have a property under contract. So now the CDCs and the HPAP, those people are behind us now. But now that you have this property under contract and you think you're on your way to a settlement, and I think at that point in August, you were anticipating, you put it under contract in June, you were anticipating to go to settlement in about 60 days in August. And on your way to going to settlement in August, what happened?
I got my NOE right around like August 1st or 5th-ish. So that's the 2-month gap there. So now we're in August. By the time I got my NOE, there was a notification from HPAP saying that they had run out of money for this fiscal year.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
And so I was still in the process of trying to get my NOE, but because I hadn't gotten it at that moment when the money ran out, I wasn't put on. I had to wait. I wasn't, like, when they found little bits of funds in between August and October for some people, I wasn't put on that list. So I had to wait until October for the new fiscal year.
That's right. That's right. And again, I know it's been a while, and all the dates and all those things might be a little fuzzy, and we appreciate you sharing this information with us. But I think overall, the message was that after you you're dealing with this government program, and after you had gone through this process from January, and you are now here in June-ish, July, and you put a property under contract, and now the government portion of your purchase price, the $206,000 of your $320,000 purchase price, the government program slammed the door in your face and ran out of money for the fiscal year.
Yes.
Yes. And then, although you had a property under contract, and although you had a settlement date scheduled for August, and although you were on your way to settlement, your second trust lender, the one that's providing you with your down payment, your closing costs, $200,000, gave a notice and said, no more money this fiscal year. Tell the people how you felt about that, being right there, ready to go to closing here in August. Talk to the people about those emotions and fears that came to you when that happened.
Well, I can't really talk about it, but essentially I was angry. Then I was angry at how things have fallen out. So I just prayed on it and talked to my family and stuff and just held on until October opened up. We were able, with the agent, to convince the seller to hold off until October. So we moved the settlement date to like November-ish, to accommodate, give extra time for them to disperse money. But I was very angry. I was very upset. And then your loved ones, they mean the best. But everyone was just telling me, oh, it'll work out. Be calm. Just be calm. You don't have to blame anybody and everything like that. But I was angry. But eventually October came, money was dispersed, and I moved to settlement, and I got settled in November. So I was very happy in it.
So you mentioned October. Here in the District of Columbia, they're on a fiscal year, and October 1, it was a new fiscal year. And so you mentioned that you were ready to go to settlement in August. They shut the door in your face. You were angry, you were disappointed, and your loved ones and all were encouraging you to be calm and patient. But from August, September, and then the new fiscal year came in October, you said your realtor was able to convince the seller to extend the settlement date from August until November.
Yes.
That seems a little extraordinary, but
and honestly, I'm really thankful that the seller was really agreeable to it, because often in these cases, I was lucky because it was a estate sale, so not in the sense it wasn't really going anywhere. But there are some sellers, they need that money because they're selling to move. They're trying to move out. So you're not always going to be lucky to get an extension. And I was just lucky in that case.
Fantastic. So you got an extension until the end of November. And then October 1st came around. And what happened? Who started doing what?
I got notification that the fiscal year had opened up. We reached out to HPAP, not the liaison, to make sure that I was still being considered. I was this close. I just needed the go ahead, really. I feel like that's when I got my actual official notice in my email that I had the eligibility. And then we took all that stuff and just immediately started processing it to just not give them any time to take it back. And then
your first trust lender, Ingrid, helped out and was helping to shepherd your loans through the program. And so you closed and settled October 31st.
Yes.
At Premium Title, at the title company, the settlement company, you went, you were there. We're talking about that you have two loans, a first trust loan, a second trust loan. Talk to the people here as we're coming up on the end of the program here about the settlement day, the paper. Is it just one sheet? What was that like, that experience?
Oh, no, it's not one sheet of paper. It's multiple sheets of paper. There's transfer of title. There's tax abatement program. There's this paper, there's that paper, there's ownership paper, there's this is, you know, you got to file this document and then you got to get this signature. It's so many papers. It takes like a good hour or two to make sure you get through all of your documents and you sign and initial everything. But once you're done, you take the picture with the key and the big key that says you're a homeowner, and you start your life.
And you start, and now you're through it. So, you're the homeowner. You started this journey in January of 23, and 10 months later, you were done with it. I know in your particular case, you also had the opportunity to use the HPAP's 203K limited renovation program. We won't talk about that program here in today's episode. We'll save that for our next episode where we'll talk about the 203K program. But just as we are closing here, you know, I'd like for you to, talk to the audience, talk to other persons out there about the HPAP program, this District of Columbia's program, the monies, the process, the journey, those 10 months. Is it worth it? Is it worthwhile? What do you say to someone who is listening to this program today, right now, and they are saying, you know what? I'm thinking about joining the Anthony Bolling's exclusive buyer agency group because I want to buy a home, but I don't know if this thing is really real and going to work for me.
I definitely think it's worth it. At the end of everything, my goal was to get a home, and the Anthony Bolling Group made sure that I got a home. They fought with me. They made sure that everybody was making sure that I have my best interest at heart, and that the people that work with me have my best interest at heart. They made sure that every document was signed, was stamped, and they really did take care of me. So if you're interested in buying a home, you should definitely do it through the Anthony Bolling Group. And if you're interested in HPAP, it's definitely a good program. It's definitely helpful, but you definitely should do it through the Anthony Bolling Group.
Fantastic. Well, everybody, you heard it here. This is Anthony Bolling with the Anthony Bolling Group and another episode of Chasing Gazillions. Not the same as making millions. Today we've had on our special guest and client, a first-time home buyer, Eliza Bolling, who has shared with you her journey from living at home with her parents to being a homeowner, and it only took 10 months. She had problems. Nothing. The process is not perfect. She ran into an issue with getting things processed. The city ran out of money for the fiscal year, but in the end, through patience and prayer, and in 10 months, she was able to get herself a new home. You like your new home, Ms. Bolling?
I do. I love it.
You do. I understand you ended up getting a sort of townhouse style, semi-detached, brick, 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, full basement, finished, remodeled, hardwood floors throughout.
Yep.
Open floor plan, central air and heat, security system.
Yep.
Backyard, porch, off-street parking, all here in the Ward 7 community of Washington, D.C. That's in Southeast D.C.
Yep.
Yes, and you were able to achieve that. And I understand that you're coming up on your 1-year anniversary here in October, and I understand the recent property assessment value of your property has skyrocketed to over $450,000.
Yep.
So your investment here in the district in a property at 320 in less than a year has grown to over $450,000.
Yep.
Wonderful. Are there any other benefits that come with home ownership that you want
It's
to?
like the tax write-offs and stuff. It feels pretty good.
Tax write-offs, yes. Oh, and speaking of tax write-offs, I understand as a first-time home buyer in the district, you also are going to enjoy a 5-year real estate property tax abatement.
Yes, that's one of the forms that you fill out at your settlement, or you can fill out. You don't have to, but I did.
You apply for this abatement.
Yes.
And then
it
it
takes
kicks
a
in.
year to process, but hopefully in October or so I'll find out if I was approved for it, which means it takes off about roughly $200 off of my mortgage.
$200 more dollars off your mortgage payment.
Yeah, for 5 years.
For 5 years. Wow. So this was a better investment than moving out and renting?
Definitely.
Okay, wonderful. All right then. Well, everybody, again, this is Anthony Bolling. We want to thank you again for joining us. If you are looking to buy a property here, we do have an exclusive buyers agency group that is forming, and it'd be our honor and privilege to work with you to help you through the home buying process. You can reach us at online, all the social media sites, 240-339-6979. Also, we're on the web at anthonybollinggroup.com, Facebook, LinkedIn. We're out there. Wherever you're watching this right now live, we're there. And we would certainly be our privilege and our honor to be of service to you on this home buying journey. Thank you all. Thank you, Mrs. Eliza. Thank you so much. We appreciate this time today. And anything that we can continue to do here to be of service to you, please let us know. All right, everybody.